Hello everyone who's taking the Cambridge IGCSE exams. Welcome to the Jobsum pre-release tutorial. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 2019 May-June Computer Science paper, Syllabus 0478, Component 22. Let's look at the paper straight away. This solution applies to the Cambridge IGCSE 2019 May-June Computer Science 0478-22 paper, and can also be used for the Cambridge O-Level 2210-22 paper. Let's take a look at the question. This question is relatively long because the pre-releases that I've seen so far are usually broken down into several tasks and let you solve them one by one, whereas this one gives you some very long background information and we need to analyze it to design a program. But after all, it still tells you what you need to do in each of the tasks 1, 2, and 3. Now, let me brief you about the background information a bit. There's an auction company which requires you to design a program for it. Right, let's now take a look at the requirements. The first rule is that your program must have a suitable approach to let users input validated data. Secondly, raw information should be clearly and properly shown. Thirdly, all variables or constants should be mnemonic. Next, if you haven't read the question yourself yet, you can pause the video and restart it after you have read through the question yourself. Assuming you have already done that, let's first highlight the variables that we need. Here, I have already highlighted them. Before programming, drawing a mind map is quite helpful. It helps us to comprehend the question and filter out redundant information so that we don't need to reread the question. First of all, we list the variables that we have already highlighted and analyze tasks 1, 2, and 3. In task 1, we need to let users input a total item number which should be greater than or equal to 10, and information regarding each item then. It should also include some variables that needs initializing, for example, the number of bids, which is the number of people that have already bidded this particular item. So, at the very beginning, it should be 0. There should also be the sold list. Items being in this list means that they have already been sold, so it should be false initially. In task 2, we firstly need to show information about all items and let users choose the items that they want to bid for. Then, they will need to enter a bid price. Of course, this should be greater than the current price. And finally, we have the task 3. In task 3, we need to obtain and display 4 pieces of information, namely total fee, which is equal to 10% of the total value sold, items sold, items with no bid, and items that haven't reached the reserve price. After we've sorted out the procedures of the program, we can move on to write our program. When writing your program, I recommend you program functionally, meaning writing each task and subtask a function. The advantages of doing this include high clarity, fast developing, and easy comprehending. It's also easy to modify or improve your code afterwards. Let's run the code and test the program. This is a web Python platform. Students of TYCIS can access this site with a GitHub account directly. Also, this code will be in your account by default. Now let's run it. First, we need to enter the number of items, for example, 5. But an error would arise saying it must be greater than 10. Then we enter the ID of the first item. and let the description be just A. For price, I can just enter an A for the moment, and it will also have an error because it must be a number. Let it be 10. Next, if I also put 1 for the ID of the second item, error will appear again. Now, let's move on to task 2. Firstly, it will display all items available, and we need to enter a buyer number. Every buyer will have a unique buyer ID. Let me enter 8848. Now, let's choose an item that we want. Let's say I want the 5th one. Since the highest bid price for it is 0 so far, I can enter any value greater than that. For example, 10. If I still want to bid, we enter our buyer number 8848 again, and then choose an item. And I want to buy item 11 this time. There will be an error saying that item 11 does not exist. So let me buy item 10 instead. The highest bid is 0, so I can enter a greater value than that, 1000. And we can continue to buy. Now I want to buy item 5. If I say my bid price is 5, an error would appear again because your bid price must be higher than the current bid price. So let me enter 50. And we have finished buying our items. Quit. For the final task 3, it will display total fee first. Total fee is 10% of the total value of all items. Then it will tell you the number of items sold, and the number of items which had not reached the reserve price. Then it will tell you the number of items without bids. So this is the flow of our program. Let's move on to the program writing part.
This is the coding for our program. First of all, it defines 7 lists. The data contained in each list will be explained in the comment afterwards. We recommend that when you're writing a program, that you use natural language to name each individual variable in your program and comment afterwards what data is contained inside each variable, so that it is easy to understand when you come back to the program afterwards. The first couple of lines are various functions, so let's take a look at the actual tasks. Task 1 is run first, and let's look at the function task 1 on line 60. So first of all, we declared a variable, number of items, and then we used the function input valid integer and returned a string parameter to the variable number of items. Let's take a look at the function input valid integer. The first variable that it declares is the variable message, and this variable is used when the program asks the user to enter an integer that is stored as a string. Then it enters an infinite loop while true. This loop will keep repeating itself until the command break is executed. Then this function uses the statement try except. The statement try except is for exception handling in Python. First, the code after try is run. If an error is discovered while running the code, then the code after the statement except will be run. Take a closer look at the except statement. The value error here means an error when converting the variable integer into an integer type, as stated under the statement try, which means the variable message entered is not a reasonable integer, so an error will be declared, and then an error message is displayed, and the whole block is repeated again. Under the while true loop, the block will be repeated until an integer is entered, and then the command break is executed to break out of the while true loop, and the function returns an integer to the variable number of items in the function task 1. Let's return our attention to the function task 1. After the user successfully inputs a valid value for the variable number of items, an if-else statement is used to determine whether the integer contained in the variable number of items is greater than or equal to 10. As in our task, it is specified that the number of items must be greater than or equal to 10. If number of items does not fulfill the condition, the code after else is run, and the function task 1 is used again. If the value entered for the variable number of items is smaller than 10, the function task 1 will be repeated continuously again and again, until the user inputs a value that fulfills the condition of the if-else statement. And then we give the variable counter the value 1, and we enter a while loop that repeatedly executes the code block under the while statement, while counter is smaller than number of items. In the while loop, first a value is input from the user for the variable item ID, and we can see that the function input valid integer makes an appearance here again, to ensure that the value the user inputs is a valid integer value. Then an if-else statement is used, and the condition is that the item ID is a natural number and not an item ID that has been entered previously. If that condition is fulfilled, then the code under if is executed. First, item ID is converted to an integer. Then the function add new item is executed. Let's go to that function and take a look at it. The function add new item is a parametric function that takes item ID as a parameter. First, an item description is entered, and then the function input price is used. In the function input price, a price is first entered, and then a try except statement is used. The program executes the code after try first, where it tries to convert the variable price to a float type data. If it fails, value error is reported and the loop is executed again. This function works similarly to the input valid integer function, except for that there is an extra else statement. If no errors are detected, the code after else will be run. The conditional statement after the else statement ensures that the price is a positive number. If the price is smaller than 0, the function input price will be executed all over again from the top. If the price is a positive number, then the price is returned. So let's return our attention to the function add new item. After the function input price is executed, the item ID is added to the list item number list, and the item description is added to the list item description list. The price as reserve price is also added to the list reserve price list. In the lines of code afterwards, we see that while the number 0 is added to the list num_bids list, the number 0.0 is added to the list bids list. That is because the list num_bids list is for the number of bids for a specific item, so it is an integer at all times, while the list bids list is the current highest price for the item, so it is a price, which potentially could be a float type, and it is best that the data type remains consistent throughout each list. And we see that the Boolean value false is added to the list sold list, because it determines whether an item is sold or not, so the value is false to begin with. Now we return our attention to the function task 1 after the add new item function. The counter is incremented by 1 after successfully adding an item to the lists. This is done so that the loop repeats until the counter is equal to the number of items, which means the number of items added to the lists is equal to the number of items. Now let's turn our attention to the else statement. We can see that there is yet another condition statement after the else statement that outputs the corresponding error message. If the item ID entered is a negative value, then the error message says item number may only be natural number. If an item ID entered is already in the list, an error message will be output saying that each item ID has to be unique. And that is the end of task 1. Let's now move on to task 2. First, in task 2, the message available items is printed. Then in the next 2 lines, the function viewItemInfo prints all of the information about one item, and the for loop repeats the function viewItemInfo until all the information for all of the items are printed. And that is done by using the index I in the range of the length of the list item number list. The length of item number list returns how many indexes there are in the list item number list. And the code within the for loop is repeated until I is equal to the total number of items in the list. Then we enter another while true, which is an infinite loop. And the function inputValidInteger makes its third appearance here to make sure the value the user inputs for the variable buyer number is a valid integer. If buyer number is equal to 0, the command break is executed and the infinite loop is ended. If buyer number is not equal to 0, the code underneath is executed. And the function inputValidInteger is used again to make sure the value input from the user for the variable selected item is a valid integer. Then a condition statement is run to make sure that the variable selected item is a valid item ID. And that is done by checking whether the variable selected item is in the list item number list. If it is in the list, then the index of the item is retrieved and the value given to the variable item index, and we use the function viewItemInfo again to display all the info for that item. Then we enter the bid price, and the function startBid is used and is passed 2 parameters, buyer number and item index. Let's take a look at the function. First, the function inputPrice is used again to make sure the bid price the user inputs is valid. And then the condition statement if-else is used to determine whether the price input by the user is greater than the current greatest bid price. If the bid price is smaller, an error message is output. Else the greatest bid price for that item in bid list is updated. And so is the buyer number in the list buyer number list. And the number of bids for that item is incremented by 1. Then a message is output stating that you have successfully bid the item of your choice, and the command break is executed, and the infinite loop ends. And so we have come to the end of task 2. Finally, we have come to task 3, the final task. Task 3 is the least logically demanding of the 3 tasks. All you need to do is to display all the information. First, we need to set the value for the variable total fee to 0. One of the advantages of naming our variables using natural language is that we can understand what these variables are for just by reading the names of the variables. So we don't have to waste time trying to understand what the variable means, and it benefits others when they're trying to revise or update our program. So let's look at the function task 3. For this part, I recommend that you try on your own, so that you can gain a better understanding of how it works. It is relatively simple and uses all of the knowledge that we have talked about previously in this video, just displaying all the information. And the task 3 ends here. At the end of this video, I'd like to give a huge thank you to everyone in the Jobson pre-release project group. The people who wrote the program, the people who provided subtitles for and dubbed the video, the people who edited and produced this video, and most of all the people who organized this whole project to benefit the students, especially when the May exam season is coming up. Thank you all.